I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. What if the most fulfilling, purpose-driven chapter of your career is still ahead of you? For many professionals, the idea of an encore career, a second act fueled by passion, meaning, and impact, feels both exciting and daunting. After decades of climbing the ladder, mastering a craft, or leading teams, the question we often ask is, now what? Well, today I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Michelle Prince, an expert in leadership and career transformation, to the Leadovation podcast. She's the author of Creating Your Encore Career, a step-by-step guide to finding purpose and prosperity in your third act. Michelle has helped countless leaders navigate this transition, and our conversation couldn't have been more timely. For recently, I attended a workshop at the Modern Elder Economy hosted by Chip Conley, a former guest of this show, where I spent 5 days reflecting on purpose and the next phase of my career. And now Michelle is here to share her insights on how we can redefine success, overcome self-limiting beliefs, and create a future that truly aligns with who we are. Dr. Michelle Prince is the founder of MPrince Consulting, a global leadership coach, and she's also an HR tech advisor and human capital consultant. Michelle has been an HR practitioner for over 30 years, a certified leadership coach since 2006 with a doctorate in organizational leadership, and has for over 20 years of global leadership expertise. Dr. Michelle Prince on the Leadovation podcast. Michelle, it's great to have you on the show. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because it's somewhat timely. There's a little bit of serendipity in the idea of creating an encore career because my wife and I made a decision, I guess about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, that we would always take some time for ourselves around professional development. Because as facilitators and coaches, it's really easy just to be delivering the content, not being the receiver of the content. So a couple of weeks ago, we went to just south of Santa Fe, and we did a workshop by the Modern Elder Academy. She's smiling. She knows what I'm talking about, which is Chip Conley's brainchild, along with some other people. Yeah. And we went through like 5 days of navel gazing, reorienting ourselves on our purpose, going through a process that was following the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell. And just, man, it was fantastic. And I think the common denominator for everybody was that we were all probably, the youngest was probably 48. Everybody went all the way up to like 78. So it was in this sweet spot of people like rethinking the third chapter of their life, making sure that we're heading in the direction that brings us joy, brings us contribution. And so here you show up and you've got this wonderful book called Creating Your Encore Career. And I thought, wow, there's some serendipity here. So tell me about the reason why you wrote the book, and let's lead into it from that standpoint. What caught your attention? Like, I need to write a book. Of all the books out there, why this one?
Sure. Well, first off, I have imposter syndrome, just knowing that Chip Conley has been on your show. So I'm not worthy.
No, no. You saw that. Yeah, that was a pretty good interview. It was a couple weeks ago. Have you heard it yet?
I did. I listened to it, of course, preliminary to this, but I've heard him speak a number of times. And since September, October of last year, he's been doing some work with coaching.com. So I got to experience him as well. And I do love how our thoughts and our premise and all of the work that we do really aligns quite well. I do have to say, though, relative to your personal experience at the live 5-day, I guess, workshop.
5-day, yeah.
the reason, getting back to the book, the reason I wrote the Create Your Encore Career is because probably 90% of the people in the world who need to hear the message and experience a pivot or transformation in their career would not be taking a week off and spending thousands of dollars at an in-person wonderful experience, but they just couldn't do it. And really wrote the book to be fully accessible to people who can't afford or wouldn't do a coaching engagement. But they might read a book about it and might look at it as a guide and a self-help. And my hope is, and what I've heard from a lot of other people is it's happening is they read the book and then they say, I know 5 or 6 people who would benefit from this book. And they either give it as a gift or they tell them about it, send them a link to it. It's very affordable. It's right there and it's a step-by-step guide. But it really takes the same principles, but I'm sure not the level of experiential learning and that pivotal moments that you had while you were there at the workshop. But it's really about finding or defining or redefining what it is you want to do. Some people call that their purpose. Some people call it their value. I call it the unique value proposition. So some people want to say, what do you put on this earth to do? What I find in my coaching, and I've been doing coaching since about 2006, is that people follow a career path that started when they were young. They may or may not love it, but if you went to school to be an accountant or a teacher or a nurse, you invested time and effort and you're going to follow that career. When I work with those same folks, Jean, that you experienced in the workshop, late 50s to mid 60s, sometimes even early 70s, and they say, I don't want to do that anymore, but I want to do something meaningful. I want to do something that would be appreciated and purposeful. So what can I do? And they have no idea. And so it really becomes a process of exploring and discovering what it is you want to do in your third act.
Understood. And is there something that happens at this period of time in one's life, say your 40s, 50s, maybe 60s, that is the wake-up call that says you got to reorient yourself to what's important? What have you noticed in the people that we've talked to around that kind of like going back to the hero's journey, if you will, with Joseph Campbell? Like, do we get a call? Does Neil all of a sudden get on the phone with, Trinity and say, you got to meet Morpheus down at this bar? What is it? Is it the time of our life that seems to bring out this awareness that we got to change? And is that common for people at this age to all of a sudden question their direction?
I think so many things could potentially be a catalyst for that moment. And just about everyone I've spoken to, the catalyst is slightly different. Personally, I've been fortunate to never have a near-death experience, okay? Although I know a lot of people who have this wake-up call, it's as a result of a tremendous loss or something like that. I can share my own personal journey and what made me have that enlightened pivot moment, but also with the clients that I work with who I'm helping them to identify what they want to do next and help them create their encore career. Oftentimes it's starting with, I'm in my late 50s, early 60s. I've just been laid off. And the thought of job search at my age is daunting. And so help me to find another job. And that's where oftentimes the conversation starts. I'm an outplacement coach as well. And so I talk to them about what they've done, what they loved about it, what they didn't like about it, what makes you tired versus inspired. We've got lots of tools and resources that we go through. And I allow them to come to the conclusion, if they do they really want to follow another full-time job journey? Or are they ready emotionally, financially, physiologically to do something different? So we go through a process of exploring and discovering what it is that you want to do. Sometimes it's based on the values that you didn't get to express in your role in your primary career. Sometimes it's based on a life is short moment. I just lost a good friend at 58. They died of cancer, and I realized I need to do something different so I bring more joy and happiness to my life, right? So everybody's journey is unique. And so depending on what their journey is, that's where we start our conversation during our coaching.
Talk about, Michelle, if you could, the person who is at this point, maybe they've got the call, they realize that they are heading in a direction that is not something that's going to create that sustainable, I don't know, lack of a better word, happiness. They're itchy. I got to make a change. And then what I wonder about, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is the confidence to make the change. It's not just, I know I need to, but will I? I know the phone is ringing. Do I pick it up? Do I have the ability at my age? Geez, this feels like a 20-year-old thing, not a 55-year-old thing, to really change my career and do something that's very different. Talk about that struggle and how you help people to have the courage to take these leaps of faith into something that goes against their whole career around stability and familiarity.
Oh, such a great question. And so much of that is surrounded by what I call self-limiting beliefs, because there really is no thing holding you back from making a career pivot except either yourself, the lack of support around you, or if you really don't have the financial wherewithal. You really do have to think about that if you're pivoting into an encore career, because an encore career is not motivated by money. It's very different. And maybe your primary career, 25, 30 years, was about paying the mortgage, paying for the kids' college, any commitment that you had that was a financial reliability and accountability in your life. Most people who are in either the late 50s, 60s, they don't have those same obligations financially anymore. And so it's really allowing them to not have to think, well, I have to make 200,000 or more a year because I have to this, that, and the other thing. So again, it depends on their journey. I work with nurses and teachers who based on where they work can retire with a pension. Also government workers, firefighters, police officers, they can retire with a pension, or military as well. So the financial aspect and that burden is a little lighter because they have that plus any other savings. And so now it's their time. It's their time to choose. I have these skills and these competencies. How do I pivot and take those to something that is appreciated, I'll be recognized, but also meaningful in a way that really resonates on a personal level? So there's no answer that it's a one size fits all, because it's not. It's a unique situation for everyone. I had someone, if you don't mind me sharing a couple stories, but this one woman who reached 62, she was a director of global operations for a very well-known medical device company, reached retirement age, and they had just announced they were going through yet another digital transformation. You had to learn a whole new system. And she's like, I think this is the moment when I step out. I love my job. I love the travel. I would love to keep doing what I'm doing, but I really don't have the desire to go through yet another transformation. Or, how many times have we heard that in work in the last 10 years? So she stepped out. Financially, she's very secure. She has her 401k. She has other investments and things, and her family has grown. she lives close by to where her daughter is. And what she found in the first 3 months of post full retirement was this, just release of stress. And it was so wonderful. She called me in month 4 because she had seen some of the work I was doing in podcasts and some of the things I was posting on LinkedIn, frankly. And she said, I need to talk to you about what my encore career should be. And I was like, okay, well, where is this coming from? What are you feeling? She goes, my daughter thinks that I am now a stay-at-home babysitter just because I'm not working full time. And I still have a life to live. And she had been divorced for over 20 years. So she really did have a full single, person life and didn't want to be really relegated to being the grandma who picked the kids up from school because the mom didn't want to or couldn't. She was willing to do that a couple days a week, take the kids to soccer practice or whatever, but that's not what was. She says there's got to be more to life than this. So it's people like that. I work with a lot of women who also are going through the caregiver challenges of being in that sandwich generation. So they're caring for their older parents still because people are living longer. We can talk about how longevity really plays into this. Even in their late 50s, early 60s, you're taking care of your parents if necessary. And your kids still have some level of reliance on you. And you need to figure out what is your identity. And for the next 10, 15 years, if you still want to have some kind of meaningful part-time work, sure, you could do retail or you could do some other part-time jobs that are maybe less on the professional level, or you can decide to do something aligned with the professional competencies and skills that you have. These days, you can do freelancing or contracting. There's so many platforms upon which you can sell your services, depending on what it is you want to do. The one woman who was a product manager, and for years and years, but what she really loved was graphic design. I had another client who was the head of user experience at a major retail chain. And for her encore career, she is now a real estate photographer because that was a passion of hers when she graduated with a degree in fine arts. She really wanted to be a photographer, but never had a chance to. So it's really the freedom to explore and discover a pivot that brings your passion and potentially your purpose, but also your skills and competencies, knowledge and confidence from doing that into Dean, what somebody wants to do next.
You're right. I'm thinking about like when we started this business 30 some odd years ago, my life back then, I had no encumbrances. I had just finished a relationship, a marriage. I lived on nothing, I had nothing. So to jump into something that felt like following my bliss, starting a coaching business and a facilitation business, there was always this thing in the back of my mind, like, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always go back and do something else, right? If I were to place myself into that position now, with the kind of lifestyle that I've grown accustomed to with my family, making a major change would involve potentially a major financial risk, at least the perception thereof. And so it sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, that what makes this a little easier for people to look at an encore career is the idea that I've got my finances in place and the risk of trying something new isn't going to cause me to have to live on the street. Those of us who are not in that situation, where we are maybe going through bankruptcy or we're going through some, we've been laid off and we're now down to nothing and we're living, back to hand to mouth at the age of 60, 65. This kind of conversation may not quite fit because I'm talking about survival. I'm not talking about mission and purpose and how to contribute on a larger level. Now, maybe in some ways, tell me if I'm wrong, Michelle, that we could combine those two and maybe even make a lot of money doing it. But I could see where a lot of buttons could get pushed for a person who's listening to this who says, yeah, that sounds great, but right now I'm dealing with the financial concerns that I have to take care of to support my family.
You're absolutely right. And that one of the chapters, I think it's chapter 6, is preparing your finances to transition into Encore Career, because it's a very important conversation to be able to have with yourself and with your family, frankly. So where are you? What's really interesting, and you said the magic words, in the lifestyle I've become accustomed to. Most people, when they retire, they realize they're going to have a different lifestyle. So if they are approaching retirement age, what lifestyle do they want to have and for how many years, and what financial support do they need in order to support that? Not everybody lives in a mansion. Not everybody takes glorious vacations either. Maybe, they just want a family vacation, that to Disney, who knows? Everybody's, again, it's not a one size fits all. So everybody's perspective is very unique. And that's why the thought of how much is enough. And I talk with a lot of financial advisors because they talk about the financial planning for pre-retirement and retirement. I talk about the emotional, healthy well-being, psychological and physiological aspects of preparing for pre-retirement and full retirement. And it's a really nice conversation to be having, because people have to define how much is enough before you're absolutely right, before they feel comfortable giving up, right, how much they were making in their primary career. And it's definitely different in their encore career. My own experience as well. I decided to step out after 30 years of corporate. There were a lot of pivotal moments during that decision making. And it was probably 2 years before I should have, and 2 years before I thought I would. Why? Because my younger son still had 2 years of college. And I'm thinking, well, I still have a financial obligation. I'm the primary breadwinner of my family, and I still had a financial obligation to make sure that we had enough to help him get to where he needed to go. We had a conversation with our financial advisor. And we said, and at the time we had that conversation, I was also caring for my older father, and his health was declining, and we knew we were going to need to, continue to help him. So we sat with the financial advisor 10 years ago and said, how much do we need? And she asked us a whole bunch of questions, looked at where we were, and said, you have enough. That's all I needed to hear. And that gave me permission to even think about what I wanted to do next. And that was one of the defining moments that gave me the freedom to step away from corporate and start my own consulting, coaching business.
You and I talked about this Chip Conley workshop of a couple of weeks ago, and for me, one of the things that came out of it was a reorientation to quality work, quality relationships, and quality experiences. Those three things were really just sort of rose to the top of my awareness, because the running of a business that you have so many different people you're responsible for and clients. To me, it started becoming a little bit more about the number of clients and the financial rewards that we were getting so that we could do with the things we wanted to do, and then I went, wait a minute, let's stay close to what our purpose is here. Let's get back to that about quality work. And so we even, cut back in some clients that we're dealing with because we want to make sure that we are focused on that. I wanted to pivot for a quick second, Michelle, on something else. My dad, when he retired, I noticed that he kind of experienced a level of isolation and loneliness because of the fact that he wasn't at work anymore. There was a structure at work. There were people that he would bump into all the time. And, when we're kids, we have a structure for how we interact with other kids. We have play dates, we have sports and so forth. But then when you get into our older age, we don't have the practice of friendship, much like a practice of learning how to ski or to play the trombone or whatever. So I think we're out of this, the skill set. And so my question back to you is, how does one interconnect this encore career with community and the support to move into a space that could feel like the unknown?
Yeah, there's a couple things that you mentioned, that people think they look forward to the flexibility. They look forward to being not having to set their alarm. They look forward to not having to be a certain place at a certain time. After about 2 or 3 months, they crave it because it is such a human need to have some level of structure, oftentimes, especially if it's what you're used to. And that's one of the things I spoke to a woman who refuses to retire. She's got lots of energy and enthusiasm for the work she's doing. A dear friend, and she said, they'll probably drag my dead butt out of this chair at some point because I'm not going anywhere, because she loves that structure. And as long as her employer keeps letting her do what she's doing, and she's doing a great job, she's going to keep doing it. She's seen her friends decline rapidly when they fully retire, both physically and emotionally and socially. They decline because of that lack of structure, meaningfulness, value. What am I if I'm not a nurse? What am I if I'm not a firefighter? What am I if I'm not the vice president of user experience? I had that same issue when I retired. I was senior vice president of human resources, head of global leadership effectiveness and learning and development. I was somebody important. I was invited to speak at conferences, all expenses paid, because I was with the number one company in our industry. I was somebody. The moment I semi-retired, I was nobody. I was not invited to any conferences. I was not asked to speak about my expertise. I'm the same person. I just don't have that title anymore. So I know there's a lot of leaders and professionals and HR people who listen to your show. And so I just want to say how uncomfortable that is for the first 5 or 6 months for someone when they leave their primary career and they are not yet figuring out what their encore career is, if they even want one. And that identity crisis that you go through is real and it is significant.
And there is something on the other side of that precipice, which when I coach with people around making these kinds of changes in their life, I'm hopefully helping them to imagine what the other side looks like. What is that life after the current career? You let go of that identity, the structure and so forth, but let's start pre-paving, let's start clarifying, let's start strategizing about what that new world looks like. I guess
by the way, that's creating your encore career. So
there you go. Could you speak to whether or not you can have an encore career without changing your career?
Okay, so I'll use myself as a specific example. 30 years of organization effectiveness, primarily human resources in various roles, either recruiter, benefits, compensation. I was an HR partner, then I was a strategic business partner, grew into vice presidents, and ultimately senior vice president of transformation, org effectiveness, with technology and people and learning and development under me, talent management, all those big things that go into all things ecosystem of HR. And that pivotal moment of back in 2019, when my dad's health started to decline, and it was that time when I said, every time I get on a plane, because I was on a plane about 100 days a year, I was in Europe. My job was actually in Europe. I was commuting from Atlanta, Georgia. Family was back home, and I was just, going out. I was deployed, for 2 or 3 weeks at a time in Europe, and then I'd come home for a few weeks, and then I'd go back out. It worked for 3 years. But when my dad his health started to decline, I realized that every time I got on a plane, I didn't know if that would be the last time I would see him. And it really spoke to my heart, which is, do I really have to keep doing this? No, my kids were out of the house It was just my husband and the animals alone. They could take care of themselves. So very selfishly, I thought, well, I'll just keep doing this. But then I realized, what am I missing by being away for so long? That I decided at that time, it was towards the middle or end of 2019, I was going to do something different starting in 2020. Who knew? But 2020 was a pivotal year for a lot of people. But it was end of 2019, I started talking to my organizational leaders about doing something different. And it was the aging parent issue that I didn't feel the burden on my husband was fair, because I was gone a lot. And so, that said to me, well, I need to do something different. And I said, well, what do I want to do? I could get a job in Atlanta that wouldn't require travel. That's a solution. And so I started thinking about the companies, and there are so many great companies in Atlanta. I started having this conversation with my husband, who's one of my greatest supporters. I couldn't have gotten where I am today without him. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, oh, great question. He's coaching the coach, right? He's heard me say it so many times. He's giving my own questions back to me. I said, well, here's the funny thing. I said, if I have to sit through another meaningless 9-box exercise with leaders who are putting people on the talent management matrix who really don't believe it and aren't going to do anything with it, I'm going to poke my eyes out. He goes, he says, I think you're ready for something different, honey.
I don't know what you're talking about, Michelle.
And so I said, you're absolutely right. And so then I started to have my own coaching conversation with a friend, a very dear friend who's a fantastic coach. And she said, well, what do you love to do? And I said, here's what I love: coaching, helping leaders be the best they can be, working on great meaty projects that really help move the HR agenda or the people strategy forward. And that's it. That's all I want to do. She goes, well, then go do it. I was like, well, what do you mean? I have to find a job and a company that'll hire me to do it. She goes, why? You can do it on your own. You're a certified coach for the last 15 years. You have a doctorate in organizational leadership. You have worked on major transformational projects. You have the experience. What's holding you back? And it was confidence. Like you said earlier, it was confidence. So I said, I don't think I could do it. But I had an opportunity because, very fortunately for me, I worked myself out of a job. So I was able to take a little bit of a severance package where I was working and went on my exploration. And about 3 months into it, I said, I'm still not sure I could do this. So I talked to Frank Wagner. I don't know if you know who he is. He's very close with Marshall Goldsmith. He's like, it was at the time, I don't know if he still is, second in command, if you will, for Marshall. I said, should I go through Marshall's certification program? And, he said, well, tell me how you would pitch your services. And I told him all those things, my credentials and everything. And he said, yeah, you don't need Marshall. You're good. Go forth and be a coach and be a consultant. And I guess that's all I needed to hear, was somebody to tell me that this was meaningful enough that I could do it. And I haven't looked back since. It's been 5 years.
Congratulations. That's a big step. So going back to the previous question about community, it sounds like your answer to that was ask for help. And you did in the area of getting a coach or your husband or other people, that when you make this transition, if you are going to make the transition, don't do it alone. Do it with a tribe. Do it with people.
Absolutely. There's a couple comments in the throughout the book of Creating Your Encore Career, which encourages you to surround yourself with people who are supportive, not the people who think you're crazy and are going to give you all the reasons not to do it, because there are plenty of them. And also really having that deeper, meaningful conversation about your why. I hate to steal from Simon Sinek, but you really have to be grounded in why you want to do this and why you feel like it's the right time, in order to really sell others on why, and get them to support you, especially if it's something, a harebrained idea. I've helped people create and launch their own businesses. I've helped people who decide they just want to be 20 hours a week dog walker. Hey, that's fine. You have a passion for animals. Do it. And their family thought that they were crazy, but you have to get them there, right? It's about the community you build around you, the people who are there to support you is so important. And that helps to really reduce or diminish that feeling of isolation.
Yeah,
that you might
it's
feel.
interesting that you mentioned the community. It's like a person who makes this transition into a new career or whatever that might look like could in fact move the cheese of other people who are dependent upon them emotionally or otherwise to be what they used to be. And now all of a sudden you're not only dealing with your own fear and uncertainty and excitement, but also having to manage the uncertainty and the fear of others around you. And I'm very fortunate to have it sounds like you are as well, a wife and a partner who completely gets the need to be aligned to purpose and whatever it takes to make that happen. Well, that's what we're going to do. But I was married once before where that wasn't the case. And so my changes, I think back in the day, probably moved some cheese. And it obviously the result was what it was. We didn't stay married, but that was part of the reason what I think happened at that particular time. But I think that it's an important thing for people to realize, to your point, is we got to sell them on this idea. We got to sell ourselves on this idea and know that part of this process might have to involve dealing with the fear that others have as a result of your change. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't continue to do it. It just means that might be part of your journey.
So true. And that's especially true getting back to women who are caregivers and the assumption that people make about what they will be doing once they're no longer working full time. That is a real challenge. And again, there's a chapter in the book about talking with people ahead of time about the thoughts and feelings that you're having and gaining their support for whatever journey you decide to take. And your community is part of the creating your encore career process. It's a big part of it. It really is. And I talk a lot, Dean, about professional networking. So if you want, like myself, I am still in the professional industry of coaching and doing HR consulting. So even though I'm not working full time, I'm like an adjunct, if you will, to small HR teams. I've worked in very, very, very large global companies, but I, in my semi-retirement, wanted to help small, medium businesses move their HR organization forward and be an adjunct member of their HR team because they're up to their eyeballs in day to day. They don't have always the time or enough hands to do strategic projects. And so myself and other people in my HR consulting ecosystem, this is where we come in as freelancers or project workers, where we can help move their projects and their strategies forward. And so I believe that my network that I cultivated and nurtured and fostered for 30 years as a professional is the reason why my coaching and consulting is as successful as it can be. Because the people I worked with over the years at many other different companies are the ones who are hiring me or referring me now for the work I do. I don't have a big marketing engine that helps promote my business. I'm not really looking for that. I'm looking for a balance in my encore career to do really meaningful work that can be appreciated and recognized, whether that's coaching, consulting. I also do some advising. And so this portfolio provides me with a feeling of accomplishment. And everybody has to define whatever that is for themselves. But the professional network that you have or colleagues, if you're not a professional, if you're not in a big professional environment desire, and there are a lot of people who don't like to do it, just keeping in touch with colleagues, previous bosses, things like that, can help you as part of your community moving forward.
God, yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I was thinking about, somebody was asking about, the cost of meetings, and, when you take a look at the total package that somebody has, and you'd be able to bring it down into an hourly, and then you figure out, well, this meeting was not very valuable, so we just lost money. And you can think about all that kind of stuff. And then we moved into a conversation about having sort of meetings with people that you've been in touch with in the past, old clients, old friends. You don't know whether it's going to turn into anything or not, but I can't tell you how many times I go have coffee or a glass of wine with somebody, whatever it is, because I'm interested in them. But in the same thing, those relationships that I keep going are the ones that bring us business in the future. And I never know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it's about the relationship that's more important.
Right.
I want to go back to tie off on one thing before, which is to say that we don't necessarily have to quit our job to start a new job to be in this encore career, that we could be in a job right now, but we want to make some changes. It doesn't mean that we're going to have to turn in our badge and leave and never come back.
Right.
We still might, tell me if I'm right, we still might be able to stay in the position, but we got to make some tweaks. We got to get on the right path. We're doing things we don't love to do. We should let go of the stuff that isn't our highest and best. It doesn't serve our calling, and have those conversations with others to say, I want to narrow or expand so that I'm being served in a way that can add more value.
Yeah.
Am I right on?
You are spot on. And there's two avenues of that. One is the individual themselves. And because you and I do leadership coaching, we see it a lot where people are giving way too much of themselves, more than they need to, for not the ROI that they're expecting, whether that be financial, appreciation, recognition, gratification, a feeling of self-fulfillment, whatever the reason. And so it's really about creating boundaries. Right. But also, here's the aspect of that. The older you get, the harder you feel like you have to work to prove yourself. It's almost like two ends of the spectrum. The younger you are, you might feel like you have to work really hard to get recognized. The older you are, you have to work really hard to stay in the game, or to not be seen as too old for whatever it is they're doing. There's so much psychological and emotional component tied to that, or refusal to admit that I'm aging. There's so much tied up in that. But thinking about balance, and there's no such thing as work-life balance. I've always called it work-life harmony. There's no such thing as, there's just life, right? And work is a part of life, but it shouldn't be the whole significant part of it. It's a part of it, but making sure that you know what's important, taking that time to step back and reflect on, where am I today? What's important to me today? I don't know if you're familiar with the wheel of life, right? It's a very helpful tool for self-reflection and helping people think about where are they in this stage? And it changes over time, changes with, the family status, things change, and even just your own desire to work in certain ways changes. That's one avenue of it. I will say, though, that some very forward-thinking HR people strategists and companies are also thinking about how can they retain I hate this, but the silver workforce, or the older workers, in the company, because they add value in a lot of ways, but maybe not in that full-time role, or maybe not in the role they're in. Move them sideways so they can be exploited for their knowledge, mentor younger, or new up-and-coming leaders as high potentials. There's so much value to moving them. They're not looking to advance their own careers because they've had a great career, so they're not as egotistical as they might have been in their younger days. Where it was all about them and climbing the ladder and leaving dead bodies in their wake. And they've learned so much from that process. And not that I have anyone in mind that I'm thinking about, but possibly. So, but reducing their work stress, right? To a point where they can bring value to the company. So a lot of forward-thinking companies, like insurance companies, financial services companies, fintech companies. Think about where people have been most of their career, sometimes 20 years in the same company. And they are thinking about how to reshape roles for those people while they prepare for the world of semi-retirement, full retirement. They may be working a reduced work schedule. Maybe they're not working the normal 50 hours a week. Maybe they go down to 35 hours a week or even, less, depending on the company. But there are HR professionals I talk to and leaders that I'm talking to that feel like this is a really great way to help people who have been with the company a really long time not be devalued by forced retirement, but still retaining them, right?
Yeah. And there's so many times I've been in conversations. I remember one, probably 10 years ago, I was talking to people over at Honeywell down in Phoenix, and there was like 15 people that were within 5 years of retirement. They were freaking out. Like that's all of our knowledge, all of our institutional knowledge, walking out the door to some place down in Maui with a Mai Tai, and that's it. And like, so how do we, maybe this encore career for people can be is, how do I transfer what I know, the wisdom, the knowledge, the life of hard knocks, the political acumen to get stuff done? How do I give that off to somebody else?
Yes.
And what does that look like? So I think that could very well, for some who want to cut back, could be part of that encore career. So, Michelle, this is like a great conversation. I think that it's so timely given the state of the workforce, the fact that we have more people retiring later in life. We always want to make sure that we have people who are around to do the work. Gone are the days that it's 55 and you're done. We're not we're not there anymore. People are wanting to contribute, wanting to do great work. Tell people about how they can connect with you. Maybe say a little bit more about where they can get the book and anything else that you're doing over the next year or so.
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm constantly posting either HR content or encore career content. I'm doing the podcasts and things, so you can find that link as well in my LinkedIn profile. And the book is called Creating Your Encore Career. I have to actually read it. A guide to finding purpose and prosperity in your third act. And the third act is really about redefining the education, primary career, full retirement. There's that little third act now. There's a lot of people who have been talking about that. I'm not the only one. And there's some really great inspirational other reading, but the Creating Your Encore Career was specifically written for people who want that hand-holding, step-by-step guide, coach in a book. People who read the book and then contact me saying, I read the book, but I'd still like a guide on the side. Fine. We can talk about what that coaching might look like, or the pre-planning coaching. So please do, connect with me if I can be of support and service. I'd love to. That is my joy and my pleasure in my encore career.
Dr. Michelle Prince, thank you so much. This has just been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newlund. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.